When people talk about the most important heavy metal albums of all time, Metallica's Black Album is always part of that conversation, not just because of how successful it was, but because of how much it changed everything. In this video series, we're going to take a deep dive into Metallica, released in 1991, better known as the Black Album. This will be a 10-part series, and each episode will focus on a different aspect of the album, the band's mindset, songwriting, production, individual songs, the backlash, success, and long-term strategy. This is not a track-by-track review. It is the full story, how Metallica got here, why they made the choices they did, and why this album still sparks debate more than 30 years later. And to understand the Black Album, you first have to understand where Metallica was before it existed. By the end of the 1980s, Metallica were already one of the biggest metal bands on the planet, but they did not start that way. Their early albums, Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets, helped define thrash metal. Fast tempos, complex riffs, long songs, very little concern for radio or mainstream appeal. Metallica built their reputation the hard way, endless touring, underground tape trading, and a fan base that saw them as authentic. They were a band that rejected glam trends and commercial polish. Then came And Justice for All in 1988. And Justice for All was a massive album, musically and culturally. It was technical, aggressive, and politically charged. Songs stretched past 7 or 8 minutes, riffs stacked on top of riffs, odd-time signatures everywhere. It also gave Metallica their first taste of mainstream exposure, thanks to One and heavy rotation on MTV. But Justice had problems. The album sounded too dry, the bass guitar was nearly non-existent, songs were dense, complex, and at times exhausting, not just for the listener, but for the band themselves. After years of non-stop touring, Metallica were physically and mentally burned out. They were bigger than ever, yet creatively constrained, boxed in by the very reputation they had worked so hard to build, and nowhere was the tension more visible than in the role of their bassist. By the time Metallica reached the end of the 1980s, Jason Newsted had been in the band for several years, but he was still not fully accepted, either by fans or at times by the band itself. Newsted joined Metallica in late 1986, stepping into one of the most impossible roles in heavy metal, replacing Cliff Burton. Cliff was not just Metallica's bassist, he was a symbol of their identity, their musical curiosity, and their early chemistry. No matter how talented Jason was, he was always going to be compared to someone he could never replace. From the beginning, Newsted brought in a different energy. He was disciplined, enthusiastic, and extremely committed. He learned Metallica's catalog quickly and threw himself into touring with intensity. Live, he was aggressive and visible, often the most animated member on stage. But in the studio, his experience was very different. On And Justice for All, Jason's bass is famously buried to the point of near invisibility. This was not an accident, and not simply a technical mistake. It reflected the deep power dynamics between the band, especially James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, who were asserting creative control during a period of grief, anger, and transition. For Jason, this sent a clear message. He was part of the band, but not fully trusted. This created a strange contradiction. Metallica were growing larger and more successful than ever, yet one of their core members felt increasingly sidelined. Newsted contributed backing vocals, songwriting ideas, and relentless touring energy, but his musical identity remained suppressed. As Metallica approached their next album, Jason found himself at a crossroads. He wanted to contribute more creatively, he wanted his instrument to matter again, and he wanted to be heard, literally and figuratively. At the same time, Metallica themselves were beginning to recognize a problem. The lack of bass presence on Justice had become a running joke among fans, musicians, and critics. More importantly, the band was starting to realize that their sound had lost weight. It was sharp and aggressive, but not full. Jason Newsted represented an opportunity to fix that. For the first time since Cliff Burton's death, Metallica were being forced to confront the question of balance, musically and emotionally. Could they function as a band again, rather than a hierarchy? Could Jason move from being a hired gun to a true collaborator? These questions were unresolved as Metallica entered the early stages of what will become the Black Album. Newsted was ready. The band was not really sure how much space they were willing to give him. And the tension between loyalty, control, and recognition would quietly shape the environment in which the Black Album was created. By 1990, Metallica faced a serious question. Do they continue pushing technical complexity even further, or do they change direction? If they stay the same, they risked becoming repetitive and inaccessible. If they changed, they risked alienating their core fan base. This was not a band struggling to break through. This was a band struggling with what comes after total domination of their genre. James Hetfield in particular was becoming more aware of the songwriting economy, how a powerful riff could be if it was allowed to breathe. Lars Ulrich was paying close attention to groove, feel, and mainstream hard rock production. Kirk Hammett was absorbing blues, classic rock, and melodic phrasing. Metallica would listen to bands like AC/DC, Aerosmith, Black Sabbath, and Led Zeppelin, not just thrash. And that mindset would soon change everything. Another factor often overlooked is exhaustion. Metallica spent most of the late 80s on the road, long tours, high expectations, internal tensions that never fully went away after the death of Cliff Burton. They were still a tight unit, but cracks were forming. They knew the next album had to be different, not just musically, but psychologically. They needed a reset, and that reset would come in the form of one of the most controversial decisions ever in their career. Metallica did not sell out. They set out to survive and evolve. They wanted heavier songs that felt bigger. They wanted clarity instead of chaos. They wanted power instead of speed. And most importantly, they wanted songs that connected instantly without sacrificing intensity. That mindset would soon lead them to a producer who would challenge everything they brought and they knew about making records. And that's where the story truly begins. In the next episode, we'll talk about Bob Rock, the producer Metallica chose, why that decision shocked fans, and how his approach completely reshaped the band's sound, discipline, and identity. Because before the Black Album could be written, Metallica had to be broken down and rebuilt. I will be continuing the series throughout January, and I will put all the episodes in a playlist. I will stick that right here. I will add the episodes as I make them. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please like the video. Helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe. If you have not already, I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.